member. I want each side to show respect to each other. I want each side to be civil with each other. No outbursts, no clapping, no boos, no yays, no nothing. This is a very serious issue, and I expect us to work together on hearing this and use proper decorum and respect for each other. And I would appreciate that very much. With that having been said, Representative Balcom, you are recognized to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. So before you, committee, what you have is the Fairness in Women's Sports Bill. This bill actually will prevent male students from playing on high school and middle school teams and colleges.
Ma'am, can I interrupt? I apologize. This is a PCS.
Yes.
It was sent out to all the members last night. It's properly before the committee. Without objection, we'll continue. I apologize, ma'am. Please continue.
My apologies. I should have said that as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This prohibits male students from playing on middle and high school teams. It requires students of sex to be recognized solely based on their reproductive biological genetics at birth for the purpose of athletic participation. It creates a civil clause for action for students who are harmed and results of the violation of this bill. It creates civil action clause for public schools units that suffer harm from resulting from following the requirements of this bill. It also allows female participants to participate in athletic teams designated for males if there's no comparable female team and the sport is not wrestling. I am going to, Mr. Chair, if it is okay with you, I would like to yield my time to our guest, if that's okay with you.
Or as far as your presentation, you'd like to allow someone to speak, and who is that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, if that would be allowed, Ms. Riley Gaines.
Yes, sir, I'll allow that. Ms. Gaines, are you here? If you'll come forward, please state your name, any organization you may represent, thank you, and you're welcome to speak on the bill.
Of course. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. My name is Riley Gaines. I'm here on behalf of myself as well as the Independent Women's Voice, and I urge you to pass House Bill 574. I recently graduated from the University of Kentucky, where I was a student and a member of the women's swim and dive team. I proudly finished my career as a 12-time NCAA All-American, a 5-time SEC champion, the SEC record holder in the 200 butterfly, making me one of the fastest Americans of all time, and a 2-time Olympic trial qualifier. All that to say, being successful at the elite level is far from easy, and it's a lifelong journey. It's impossible to put into words the amount of time and dedication and sacrifices that I've made. I started swimming when I was 4, so I've dedicated 18 years of my life to achieving maximum performance in my sport, which is not unique when competing at the collegiate level. On March 17th of 2022, my teammates and I, as well as female swimmers from universities around the country, were forced to compete against biological male Leah Thomas. Thomas was allowed to compete in the women's division after competing on the University of Pennsylvania's men's team the 3 years prior. The first day of competition, we watched on the side of the pool as Thomas swam to a national title in the 500 freestyle, beating out the most impressive and accomplished female swimmers in the country, including many U.S. Olympians and American record holders by body lengths. It's important to mention that Thomas was ranked 462nd at best amongst the men the year before. That next day, I raced Thomas in the 200 freestyle, which ended up in a tie. We went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second. Having only one trophy, the NCAA gave it to Thomas and told me that I had to go home empty-handed because Thomas needed to hold the trophy for pictures. I felt betrayed and belittled, and like my efforts and sacrifices I had made had been reduced to a photo op to validate the identity and feelings of a male. But my feelings did not matter. But that is not all. In addition to being forced to give up our awards and our titles and our opportunities, the NCAA forced female swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas, a 6'4", 22-year-old male equipped with and exposing male genitalia in a room full of vulnerable, undressed women. Let me be clear. We were not forewarned about this arrangement. No one asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. If nothing else, I truly hope you can see how this is a violation of our right to privacy and how we felt embarrassed, uncomfortable, and even traumatized by this experience. In 1972, Congress enacted Title IX to end unjust sex discrimination in all aspects of education, including collegiate athletics. Make no mistake about it, by allowing Thomas to displace female athletes in the pool and on the podium, the NCAA and these colleges intentionally discriminated on the basis of sex. Although they claim they acted in the name of inclusion, their policies in fact excluded female athletes, the very athletes whom Title IX was created to protect. It's impossible to speak for every single girl on that pool deck, and I don't claim to speak for every girl, but I can wholeheartedly attest to the tears that I witnessed from the 9th and 17th place finishers who missed out on being named an All-American by 1 place. And again, I can wholeheartedly attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room from 18 to 22-year-old girls who were exposed to male body parts and having to undress in a room with a male watching. I can attest to the anger and whispers of frustration expressed by these girls who, just like myself, had worked their entire lives and sacrificed so much to get to that moment. And I can wholeheartedly attest to the fact that around the country, female athletes who protested the inclusion of Leah Thomas in the women's division were threatened, intimidated, and emotionally blackmailed into silence and submission. I'm certain I speak for more than just myself when I stand before you and share my testimony. But unfortunately, our experiences as D1 swimmers, it's not unique. The number of female athletes who have been denied opportunities, again, traumatized or hurt by these policies that claim to promote inclusion is growing at an alarming rate. It's simply unacceptable, and the integrity of women's sports is lost, and that is why I implore you to please pass legislation that preserves women's athletic opportunities at all levels. I appreciate the opportunity to share my experience, and I hope you consider the facts, the science, and the growing stories. Thank you.
Representative Balcom, would you want to say anything else as far as your presentation?
No, sir. I yield.
Thank you. Representative Paré, would you like to say anything as a primary sponsor?
I'll just quickly say that this is an excellent bill. This is a common sense bill. As a mother of 2 teenage athletes who compete competitively in sports, I can't imagine that there would be any opposition to the idea that women should be forced to compete against biological males in sports. It seems to me that that's pretty common sense. I support this bill. I hope everybody in this room favorably reports it at a committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Baker, would you like to make any comments as a primary sponsor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. I just want to say I appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate Representative Balcom's strong work on this. I respect the dedication and courage of all athletes, and including the female athletes like Riley Gaines, who has had the courage to come and speak before us. I think, like Representative Paré said, this is a very common sense bill, and as a physician, I would assert that the years of data have indicated that after many years of hormone treatment, there is still a very significant and clinically significant difference in the abilities of males to compete on a physical level. And so this bill makes sense, and it is an opportunity for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your presentation. I will now ask, are there any members of the committee that have any questions or comments? Representative Harrison, you're recognized.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for the presentation, and Ms. Gaines for making the trip. I appreciate your story. I wanted to ask about the sort of implementation specifics of this bill, because I've been trying to sort this out since this bill first appeared 2 years ago. So, as I understand it, there are 180,000 North Carolina high school athletes, and right now there are 17 that have applied for the transgender status, whatever that the North Carolina High School Athletic Association has set up to screen transgender athletes. And of those, there are only 3 women, and only 2 pass the screening, and 1 no longer plays sports. So we're now down to 1 female athlete that would be affected by this bill. I do have problems with that, but I wanted to know specifically how, so the NC Athletic Association has a process for screening athletes. What does this bill do that's different? Does this involve genitalia inspection, for instance?
Representative Balcom, would you like to respond to that, or you have staff respond?
No, I can respond to that.
You're recognized.
So what they use currently with their, because you actually said that they actually already have their process, with their form, they're already asking those questions to put this in place. So we will not be doing anything like that. On the form, the physician actually fills out whether they're male or female. They also ask in this form that is statewide and approved by North Carolina, it asks if there's any surgeries. It also asks, and I'll be happy to give you a copy of this, Representative Harrison, or anyone who wants it in this committee as well. And also it asks if you are taking any medication or supplements as well on this medical form. So that is part of the process that already has to be done when an athlete in North Carolina.
Follow up?
Follow-up, yes,
You're
and
recognized.
I appreciate that, thank you. So there's no additional screening that's going to happen, it's just specific to this form?
Representative Balkum.
No, ma'am.
I appreciate that. And just a quick comment, I'm going to listen
You're
to the...
recognized for a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm obviously troubled by this bill. I understand that the suicide ideation rate amongst transgender youth is over 80%, and 40% of transgender youth have committed suicide. I feel like we're further stigmatizing the community. These kids just want to play sports. I don't see that there's any competitive disadvantage in the middle school and high school level. I appreciate Dr. Baker's comments to that effect, but I'm worried that we're searching for a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, and I'm worried about how this reflects on our state. I really appreciate the work you've put into this. That's all I'm going to say for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Alston, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions and then a few comments as well. And this may be for staff. I wanted to clarify the scope of the bill. I understand that it applies to any non-public school that, obviously it applies to public schools, but it applies to non-public schools that are members of an organization that administers interscholastic athletic activities, so essentially the High School Athletic Association as an example. I want to clarify whether or not it applies to a non-public school that's a member of, say, the Independent Schools Athletic Association that is also playing another school that is a member of the Independent Schools Athletic Association. I'm unclear how far this reaches into non-public school territory.
Yes, ma'am. Brian Gwynn from staff is recognized to respond.
Brian Gwynn, Legislative Analysis. So the bill, with respect to non-public schools at the middle and high school level, it would apply to any non-public schools that are members of an administering organization under state law, which right now is the High School Athletic Association. If the non-public school is not covered by that provision, if they are playing against a team from any school that's required to follow the provisions under this bill, then they would also be governed by these proposed requirements as well.
Would you like a follow-up?
Yes, a follow-up to
You're
that.
recognized.
I think I'm still unclear. I think I want to know if there are two schools, School A and School B, that are playing against each other, that are non-public schools, and neither of them are a member of the High School Athletic Association or bound by the requirements of the High School Athletic Association. Does this bill apply to those schools in that
Gwynn, you're
competition?
recognized to respond.
In that situation, it would not apply to those schools.
Thank you. At least one other question, potentially for staff.
Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
So I guess, due process that's included in the bill, the grievance procedure, as it's written, applies to students and I think school officials who challenge someone's gender identity and or claim that they have been harmed or will be harmed because one of their transgender classmates has been allowed to play sports. I want to clarify that this bill does not include any due process, any grievance mechanism, or protections for a transgender student who is deprived of an athletic opportunity.
Staff's recognized to respond.
Brian Gwynn, Legislative Analysis. So this bill would create separate cause of actions for students who have been harmed as a result of a violation of the law. It does not address any potential causes of action that a student would have outside of that.
Does that answer?
Thank you. Yes, it does. I have a comment on the bill.
You're
Mr.
recognized
Chair.
for a comment.
Thank you. My colleague mentioned that this bill is a solution in search of a problem, and in fact, when this bill was filed 2 years ago, that's precisely how the leadership of the House described it, and I don't think anything's changed. This bill is simply a proxy for discrimination. The justifications for it are not supported adequately by a need. and policies like it are finding less and less refuge under our laws. This kind of legislation has recently been rejected by conservative governors in other states because it is discriminatory on its face and wholly inconsistent with basic civil rights recognized by our highest courts. The High School Athletic Association has a gender identity policy that's been referenced by the bill sponsors and by folks on this committee that is consistent with policies adopted in other states and that has proven to be effective. I think everyone wants their kids to grow and learn in safe environments, but this bill does nothing to make our schools safer for students or help them succeed. If we pass this, all girls who want to play sports will be less safe and potentially subject to invasive checks and inappropriate questions to determine their eligibility. More pointedly, this bill is a pretext for bigotry. It's a part of what I think is a larger effort to ban transgender people from living their lives openly. Transgender youth will not have access under this bill. They won't have access to the important childhood experience of sports. This bill will put their mental health at further risk, and their friends and peers will learn that exclusion and scapegoating are okay. You're also inviting with this bill, I think, the same kinds of devastating economic consequences that we saw with HB2. Lost investment, stalled job growth, and national embarrassment. There's simply no need for us to go back to that. I think this bill is a distraction from much more important issues that we should be addressing in our schools, like aging infrastructure, learning loss, teaching shortages, the list goes on. This bill is extremely dangerous, it's unnecessary, and I'll be voting against it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other questions or comments by any member of the committee? Representative Sane, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Often in our committees and after the debate over HB2, I've often heard some of my colleagues talk about the devastating losses we received in this state after that bill was put out there and through all of that. And it was a miserable time. I didn't like where we were talking about it, didn't know why we had to talk about it because I'm in Charlotte an awful lot. But I can't let it stand, and this is not really all that germane to the bill, except for it was just said in this committee about the devastating losses that our state has suffered. Last I checked, over the last 10 years, this state has done very well economically. And so having that entered into the debate, I take true exception with, because that is indeed not true. And so however this bill goes, things like that aren't true need to stop being said in committee. That's all I have to say about it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Representative Jones, you are recognized.
Yeah. You know, I was a high school athlete, a college athlete, ran cross country, track, an Ivy League, and competed. And when you go out and practice, I ran into female athletes, some of whom kicked my butt. So my point is that I think when you go after the transgender situation, when people are, for whatever their reasons, are trying to move from one to the other, that's a very deep, personal, complex thing. But I don't know if making laws to prophylactically stop somebody from making a personal decision as though it's going to upset high school athletics or upset college, you know, I think that's crazy because, you know, it's such a deep personal thing. It's not a threat, if you want to use that term advisedly, to any athlete that's out there trying to compete. I can't see large numbers of people who used to be boys who are now trying to be girls or vice versa, upsetting the apple cart, so to speak. And I think that the high school association's authority is perfectly good to work with the situation at a much more hands-on level than from up here coming in attacking a very, very small group of people who probably already have enough on them as young people without their legislature trying to get in and interfere with it, and when it should be between doctors and people who are experts about this kind of thing. And so I always get upset when someone tries to pick on minorities. We use that term for race, gender, handicap, but there are other more discrete minorities. We should be trying to let people make these personal decisions on their own and not beating up on them. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Representative Alston, you're recognized to speak on the bill a second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to briefly offer some information to folks on the committee. I think the losses related to the passage of HB2 have been reliably calculated at over $3.5 billion. And that's not something that I want to repeat for the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Harrison, you're recognized to speak on the bill a second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I had a question and a quick comment on Representative Sane and Alston's comment. So Representative Sane is right. Our economy has been booming, but who knows how much stronger it would have been if we hadn't had that $3.5 billion in losses. But my question for the bill sponsor